I sighed deeply as I tossed my laptop onto the couch, frustrated by yet another argument with Derrick and Casey. It was like a broken record, playing the same tune of disrespect and dismissal over and over again. "Is it really too much to ask for a little help around here?" I said, glaring at Derrick lounging in his recliner, engrossed in some mindless TV show. "I work just as many hours as you do, but somehow all the household responsibilities fall on me." Derrick barely looked up from the screen. "If you have a problem with how things are, then maybe you should quit your little hobby and focus on being a better housewife." My blood boiled at his condescending remark. "My little hobby is a successful freelance design business that brings in half our income, you ungrateful ass." Casey snickered from the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. "Yeah, but let's be real. Dad's the one with the real job carrying this family." I whirled to face him, my frustration reaching a boiling point. "You've got a lot of nerve, mooching off us while contributing nothing but snarky comments." Derrick finally looked up. "Don't talk to my son that way. If you did your job right, he wouldn't have to lift a finger." That was it, the final straw. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, emotions raging inside me. You know what? I'm done. I'm so damn tired of being disrespected and taken for granted in my own home. "Where are you going?" Derrick called out, a hint of surprise in his voice. I paused at the door, turning to face them both with a defiant glare. "Somewhere I'm appreciated. Don't bother calling until you've learned to value everything I do for this family." With that, I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. No more being a doormat. From now on, they were going to realize exactly how much I contributed, and just how invaluable I truly was. I pulled into the parking lot of the Bluebird Motel, a small establishment on the edge of town. It wasn't the Ritz, but it would serve its purpose, providing me a quiet refuge to work and gather my thoughts after that disastrous argument. As I entered the modest room, I tossed my bag on the bed and opened my laptop, desperate to meet the looming deadline for my latest design project. With a deep breath, I tried to push aside the swirl of emotions and focus on the task at hand. But my mind kept drifting back to the years of being dismissed and disrespected by Derrick and Casey. All the nights I stayed up late, burning the midnight oil to meet client demands while still handling all the household responsibilities. The endless loads of laundry, grocery shopping, meal prepping, tasks that went completely unappreciated by my so-called family. Tears of anger and hurt stung my eyes as I recalled Derrick's callous words, reducing my thriving design career to a mere hobby. As if the income I brought in wasn't just as vital as his paycheck in keeping our household afloat. And Casey was no better, content to leech off our hard-earned money while mocking my contributions. The smug entitlement radiating from that spoiled brat made my blood boil. No more. I was done being the unsung hero, the unappreciated workhorse of the family. If they couldn't see my value, I'd make them feel the impact of my absence, and they'd be damn sorry they took me for granted. With renewed determination, I attacked the design project, pouring all my frustration and pent-up resentment into creating something truly exceptional for my client. I'd show them all what a little hobby could achieve when passion and talent joined forces. By the time the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, I had put the finishing touches on what might be my best work yet. A small, satisfied smile crossed my lips as I hit send on the file. "That's just a taste of what you've been overlooking, fellas," I muttered under my breath. "Get ready, because you haven't seen anything yet." After basking in the satisfaction of delivering a stellar project, I turned my attention to the next phase of my plan. It was time for Derrick and Casey to truly feel the impact of my absence. With a few taps on my laptop, I remotely canceled the utility payments and halted the automated grocery and household supply orders. A twisted smile crossed my lips as I pictured the chaos that would soon unfold back at the house. Sure enough, within a couple of days, my phone started blowing up with angry texts and calls from Derrick. "Reagan, what the hell? The power and water just got shut off." I let the call go to voicemail, ignoring his demands for an explanation. Then came a barrage of texts from Casey. "Yo, did you forget to pay the bills again? Real nice, we have no Wi-Fi now." As the days passed, the messages grew increasingly desperate. "Seriously, babe, let's talk this out. The house is a mess and we're out of food. Mom, I can't even do my laundry. This is getting ridiculous. Part of me relished in their rising panic and dependence on the order I used to maintain so effortlessly, but I remained stoic, unmoved by their pleas. Finally, after nearly a week of radio silence from me, Derrick showed up at the motel room, his face flushed with anger. "Open up, Reagan. I know you're in there." I cracked the door open, eyeing him coolly. "What do you want, Derrick? Cut the crap and come home. This little tantrum of yours has gone far enough." I laughed derisively. "Tantrum? I'm simply giving you both a glimpse of what life is like without me handling everything." Derrick's eyes narrowed. "So what, you're holding the household hostage? Real mature, Reagan." "Don't act so shocked," I shot back. "You'd think after all these years of me running the show you'd have a little more appreciation for everything I do." To my satisfaction, Derrick's bravado faltered, seemingly at a loss for words. "Don't worry," I continued. "I'm happy to restore order and make your life comfortable again. But first, you're going to start showing me the respect I deserve around here." With that, I shut the door in his stunned face, leaving him to stew in the disarray he once took for granted. A couple days after my confrontation with Derrick at the motel, I decided to pay my mother, Vivian, a visit. I needed a break from the escalating tensions with my husband and stepson, and her place had always been a peaceful refuge. "Honey, it's so good to see you," she said as she ushered me inside, "though I wish it were under better circumstances." She gave me a concerned look. "Derrick called, ranting about you refusing to come home. What's going on?" I sighed, plopping down on her well-worn couch. "The usual, Mom, me doing everything while he and Casey treat me like a glorified maid." I shook my head. I finally put my foot down, and now they're feeling the consequences. Vivian pursed her lips but didn't argue. She knew better than anyone the disrespect I'd endured from my family over the years. As we chatted, my eyes drifted to a battered cardboard box tucked in the corner of her living room. "What's all that?" I asked, nodding towards it. "Oh, just some old papers and mementos," she replied with a dismissive wave. "I was going through the attic and found it mixed in with your father's things." My curiosity was piqued, and I rose to take a closer look. Vivian didn't object as I began sifting through the box's contents, a jumbled assortment of letters, receipts, and other documents. That's when I spotted it, a stack of banking statements and overdue notices from several credit card companies, all addressed to Derrick. "Mom, what is all this?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my gut. Vivian peered over my shoulder at the papers. "I'm not sure, dear. Your father never mentioned anything about money troubles." As I examined the documents more closely, it became disturbingly clear that Derrick had been hiding massive debt from reckless gambling by the looks of it. And based on the dates, this had been going on for years, long before we'd even met. Anger and betrayal lanced through me as I realized he must have been siphoning funds from our joint accounts to cover his losses and avoid collections. Memories flashed of all the times I'd carefully budgeted for household expenses, only to have my figures thrown off with no explanation. My hands shook as I gathered up the damning paperwork. That lying, cheating bastard! Vivian's eyes widened at the venom in my voice. "Reagan, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I rose. "Just found another reason to stick it to Derrick, that's all." I marched out of her house, plans for revenge taking shape in my mind. Derrick wanted to see how valuable I was to our household? Well, I was about to demolish his world, starting with the crumbling financial facade he'd worked so hard to maintain. Armed with the evidence of Derrick's deceit, I felt a renewed sense of determination. It was time to take my revenge to the next level and really make him squirm. I marched back to the house, the box of incriminating documents tucked under my arm. To my surprise, the front door was unlocked. Clearly, Derrick had grown complacent in my absence. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here," Derrick spat as I barged into the living room. Casey looked up from his phone, eyes widening. Hey, Reagan?" I ignored them both, dropping the box onto the coffee table with a thud. "You want to know why I've been refusing to come home? Take a look." Derrick frowned as he riffled through the papers, but his expression quickly morphed into one of horror. "Where did you get these?" he hissed. "Oh, from your stash of secrets you've been hiding all these years," I countered. "Nice gambling habit, by the way. Been having fun blowing through our savings? Casey's brow furrowed in confusion. Wait, what's going on? Stay out of this. Derrick snapped at his son before turning his glare back to me. You had no right going through my private affairs. I scoffed loudly. Private affairs? You mean the affairs you've been keeping from me while draining our accounts behind my back? Realization seemed to dawn on Casey's face as he looked between us uncertainly. Derrick, meanwhile, had gone pale. Seizing the opportunity, I pressed on. Here's the deal. Either you shape up and agree to some serious counseling to work through this massive betrayal. I let the words hang in the air as Derrick clenched his jaw. Or I take these papers and every shred of evidence about your reckless behavior public. For a moment, Derrick seemed to weigh his options. His jaw twitched as his gaze flickered between me and the documents. You're bluffing, he finally said, though his tone lacked conviction. Am I? I challenged, stepping closer until I was nose to nose with him. After all these years of me covering for you, playing the dutiful wife while you ran around like a selfish child, I'm done with your crap, Derrick. It's time to face the consequences. Derrick opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. A tense silence stretched between us, the air thick with unspoken anger and resentment. Finally, Casey cleared his throat. Maybe you guys should just, go to that counseling thing? His expression was almost pleading as he looked imploringly at his father. Derrick's nostrils flared, and I could see the war raging behind his eyes, pride battling pragmatism. With a decisive sneer, he seemed to make his choice. Forget it, he spat, whirling on his heel and storming out of the room, leaving a stunned Casey gaping after him. A cold smile crept across my lips. If Derrick thought this was the end, he was sorely mistaken. I was just getting started. Derrick's obstinate refusal to face his issues and attend counseling was the final straw. If he wanted to cling to his misguided pride, so be it, but he wouldn't be dragging me down with him any longer. It was time to expose him for the deceitful, reckless man he truly was. I spent the next few days meticulously gathering evidence, documentation, and personal accounts that portrayed Derrick's shameful behavior. With a little creativity and some slick graphic design work, I crafted a damning expose that left no room for doubt regarding his gambling addiction and shady financial dealings. Finally, I took to social media and various community forums, blasting out the incriminating compilation far and wide. Within hours, the reactions began pouring in. Oh my God, I had no idea the Moros were dealing with this. Derrick always seemed like such a stand-up guy. This is horrible. How could he do this to his wife and family? Disgusting. I watched with grim satisfaction as Derrick's meticulously crafted public image crumbled in the wake of his hidden indiscretions being aired for all to see. But I didn't stop there. No, Derrick's humiliation would be complete. Leveraging my finely honed marketing skills, I launched a promotional campaign for my design business that highlighted my personal journey of perseverance and self-empowerment. Inspirational graphics, uplifting messaging, and carefully selected testimonials from clients painted a portrait of the talented, resilient woman I was, in stark contrast to the disgraced scoundrel I'd endured for far too long. Within days, my social media was ablaze with an outpouring of support and admiration. New business inquiries flooded my inbox, and my following skyrocketed as people rallied behind the heartwarming story of my professional triumph over personal adversity. Amidst the whirlwind of attention, I received a call from Derrick. His voice was low, seething with impotent rage. "You're ruining me," he growled. "Is that what you want? To see your husband lose everything while you bask in the spotlight?" A cold smile crossed my lips as I reveled in his pain. "I want the world to see the truth about who you really are," I replied evenly. "As for me, I'm simply rising from the shadows you kept me trapped in and shining a light on my own worth." There was a pause, then Derrick exhaled a shuddering breath. "You're going to regret this," he grated out, then abruptly hung up. But as I surveyed the overwhelming positivity surrounding my newly empowered image, I felt nothing but vindicated resolve. Derrick had sown the seeds of his own demolition. I was simply the one bold enough to finally reap what he deserved. In the aftermath of my explosive revelations about Derrick's misdeeds, the fallout was even more satisfying than I could have imagined. His reputation in tatters, he became a pariah, the subject of gossip, and disdainful whispers wherever he went. But the true coup de grace was his rapidly deteriorating financial situation. Once the creditors realized Derrick's web of lies had been exposed, they wasted no time unleashing the force of their collections efforts. Suddenly, all those gambling debts he'd been frantically juggling came crashing down in one fell swoop. It wasn't long before Derrick was knocking at my door again, this time with a very different demeanor. Gone was the arrogant bluster, replaced by the pathetic, almost groveling air of a man watching his life unravel. "Reagan," he began, his voice uncharacteristically meek. "You've made your point. You win, okay? I was wrong and I screwed up badly." I folded my arms and eyed him coolly, unmoved by his obvious attempt to play on my sympathies. "What do you want, Derrick?" he sighed, rubbing a hand over his face warily. "I need you to come home. Help me straighten this nightmare out before I lose everything." A harsh laugh escaped my lips. And why exactly would I do that, after all the lies, the deceit, the blatant disrespect? I shook my head slowly. "No, you made this bed, Derrick. Time to lie in it." Frustration flickered across his features. "Don't be unreasonable, Reagan. Our lives, our finances, everything is intertwined. If I go under, it'll drag you down too." "Maybe you should have thought about that before gambling away our future," I countered flatly. Derrick opened his mouth, no doubt, to offer another guilt-ridden appeal, but was cut off by an unexpected voice. "She's right, you know." We both turned to see Casey emerging from the shadows. His expression hardened. "You only have yourself to blame for this whole disaster." Derrick's eyes widened in surprise and hurt at his son's accusatory stance. "Casey, you're taking her side? After everything I've done for you?" But Casey remained resolute, his jaw set in grim determination. "No, Dad. I'm just seeing the truth for what it is, instead of letting you feed me more lies." He shook his head slowly. "Reagan's the one who's been holding everything together, while you jeopardized it all with your selfishness." A muscle twitched in Derrick's cheek as he struggled to find a rebuttal, but nothing came. In that moment, he looked utterly defeated, just a sad, pathetic shadow of the arrogant blowhard he used to be. I couldn't help but feel a surge of vicious satisfaction at seeing him crumble, forced to confront the consequences of his ego and the crumbling facade of the life he'd built on my sacrifice. "Get out, Derrick," I stated flatly, unwilling to let his self-pity sway me further. "I'm done cleaning up your messes." With one last broken glance between me and Casey, Derrick seemed to shrink in on himself as he turned and trudged away in silence, leaving me to begin setting the course for my new, unencumbered life. With Derrick's pathetic, tail between his legs retreat, a massive weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt truly free, liberated from the chains of his deception and toxic disrespect. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, as Derrick had little ground to contest my demands after the spectacular implosion of his life. I didn't ask for much beyond my fair share, content to start over unencumbered by his mounting debts. As the final paperwork was signed and notarized, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the hollow, broken husk of a man sitting across from me. How quickly the once smug, arrogant Derrick had crumbled in the wake of his own hubris. Part of me felt a twinge of pity, but it was overwhelmingly overshadowed by the immense sense of relief washing over me. "This is really what you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a mumble as he stared blankly at the divorce decree. I met his gaze levelly, my jaw set in firm resolution. "It's what I deserve, Derrick, to finally be free of your lies and disrespect." He opened his mouth as if to protest further, but seemed to think better of it. With a slow, resigned nod, he scribbled his signature and pushed the papers back across the table. Just like that, it was officially over between us. I was a new woman, unshackled from the unhealthy dynamic that had stifled me for far too long. In the days that followed, I wasted no time in beginning my new chapter. The money from my divorce settlement, combined with the windfall of new business from my viral campaign, allowed me to purchase a cozy 2-bedroom house just outside the city. Simple but chic, it was the perfect fresh start, tailored to my solo needs, though I did make sure to convert the spare room into a comfortable suite where my mom could stay whenever she liked. "This place is just perfect for you, honey." Vivian gushed as I gave her the grand tour during her first visit. A warm, proud smile crinkled the corners of her eyes as she pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so incredibly proud of the way you stood up for yourself." I hugged her back fiercely, basking in the swell of emotion brought on by her unconditional support and my newfound independence. For the first time in ages, I felt complete, self-assured, and in control of my own destiny. Over the following weeks, I settled into my new home and routines with a vigor and optimism I hadn't experienced in years. Each morning, I'd wake up energized, ready to dive headfirst into a new slate of exciting design projects and business opportunities. And in my downtime, I'd look around my little sanctuary, the cozy living room adorned with hand-picked decor, the sunlight streaming through the windows, and smile contentedly. This was my hard-earned reward, a tangible manifestation of the strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. The old Reagan, who meekly accepted disrespect in the name of keeping the peace, was gone forever. In her place stood a self-assured woman who understood her immense value and self-worth, a woman who refused to spend another day in the shadows of an ungrateful partner. And as I reflected on the tumultuous journey that led me to this new beginning, I silently vowed to never let anyone or anything dull that inner fire again. "What a joke!" Derrick's mocking voice echoed through the hallway, shattering my world into pieces. "You really think that raggedy, upcycled garbage is going to sell? Wake up, sis. Raylan's living in a fantasy land." I froze, my heart pounding in my ears as I listened to my husband's scathing words, each one driving a fresh dagger into my soul. This wasn't some stranger criticizing my life's work. This was the man I'd loved and trusted, the father of my child. Harper's giggle cut through the stillness like a knife. "Mom's so delusional. She honestly believes people will pay top dollar for old rags sewn together." Tears stung my eyes as the weight of their betrayal crashed down upon me. How could they be so cruel, so dismissive of the passion that fueled every stitch, every design born from repurposed materials? My dream wasn't just some whimsical flight of fancy. It was a commitment to sustainability, to breathing new life into the discarded. As their laughter subsided, I slipped away, my mind racing with a torrent of emotions: hurt, anger, determination. For too long, I'd turned a blind eye to Derrick's subtle jabs and Harper's growing resentment. But this was a line crossed, a violation of trust that could never be undone. Later that night, as Derrick snored beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing within, I made a decision. No more playing the victim. No more allowing them to trample my dreams underfoot. If they wanted to see me as a joke, I'd give them a punchline they'd never forget. The next morning, I called my best friend, Elise, a former lawyer with a razor-sharp mind. She was the only person I could trust with the truth, and the only one who could help me fight back. "Elise, I need your help," I whispered, glancing over my shoulder to ensure Derrick hadn't overheard. "Things with Derrick, they're not what they seem." Her voice was a lifeline, a beacon of clarity in the chaos. "Tell me everything." And so I did, laying bare the years of emotional neglect, the financial misdeeds I'd uncovered, and the gut-wrenching betrayal that had shattered my world. With each word, I felt a weight lifting, replaced by a steely resolve to take back control of my life and my business. "We'll make him pay," Elise vowed, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Every penny he stole, every insult he hurled, he'll answer for it all. Starting today, we document everything." As I hung up the phone, a newfound sense of purpose coursed through my veins. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I was done being the punchline. It was time to rewrite the joke, and this time, I'd be the one delivering the cutting final line. Elise didn't waste any time. Within days, she'd formulated a meticulous plan to expose Derrick's misdeeds and secure my financial future. "First things first," she said during one of our clandestine meetings at a quiet cafe. "We need to document every single transaction he's made using your business accounts." I nodded, pulling out a thick manila envelope stuffed with bank statements and financial records. "I've been gathering evidence for months. Look at these numbers. He's been siphoning funds into his personal accounts, leaving me with just enough to keep the business afloat." Elise's brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "That snake, he's been embezzling from you this whole time." "It gets worse." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the next revelation. "I overheard him on the phone with his banker last week. He's been lying about our profits, cooking the books to make it look like we're barely scraping by, so he can claim you're a financial burden and gain leverage in the divorce proceedings," Elise concluded, her jaw clenched tight. "Despicable." Our conversation was interrupted by the shrill ringing of my phone. Derrick's name flashed across the screen, and I felt a surge of revulsion. Without hesitation, I declined the call and muted the ringer. Elise's eyes narrowed. What did that weasel want? Probably checking up on me, making sure his little cash cow is still producing. I spat the words like venom, years of pent-up resentment bubbling to the surface. Sliding a worn voice recorder across the table, Elise fixed me with a determined stare. "Start wearing this at all times. We need to catch him in the act, get him on record spewing his vitriol." The weight of the device in my palm felt heavy, a tangible reminder of the war I was waging. But I was done being a victim. It was time to fight back. That night, as Derrick and I sat down for dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Harper picked at her food, her gaze flickering between us like a spectator at a boxing match. "What's gotten into you lately?" Derrick sneered, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "You've been acting awfully strange." I took a deep breath, pressing the record button beneath the table. "Just focused on the business, that's all." "Just," he scoffed, stabbing at his steak with more force than necessary. "That little hobby of yours? Don't kid yourself, Ray. It's never going to amount to anything more than a drain on our finances." Harper's eyes widened, but she remained silent, no doubt fearing the wrath of her father's sharp tongue. "You know, Derrick," I replied, keeping my voice measured and even, "for someone who claims to support my dreams, you sure have a funny way of showing it." His fork clattered against the plate as his fist slammed down on the table. "Support your dreams? Don't make me laugh. Every penny I've wasted on that ridiculous project is a penny too many." The words stung, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I met his venomous glare with a steely gaze of my own. "Well then, it's a good thing you won't have to waste any more of your precious money on me." Rising from the table, I fixed him with a cold smile. "I'll be sure to pack my bags tonight." As I left the room, Derrick's sputtering protests fell on deaf ears. The war had begun, and I had no intention of losing. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating. Derrick prowled the halls like a caged animal, his footsteps heavy with barely contained rage. Whenever our paths crossed, his eyes bored into me, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in my resolute facade. But I refused to break. With each snide remark, each thinly veiled insult, I stood my ground, meeting his vitriol with stony silence. The recorder in my pocket became a talisman of sorts, a constant reminder of the evidence I was against him. Harper, caught in the crossfire, retreated into herself. Gone was the carefree teenager who once laughed and joked with her father. In her place was a hollow-eyed shadow, flinching at raised voices and avoiding us both whenever possible. It was during one of these encounters that the dam finally burst. "What's wrong, Princess?" Derrick sneered as Harper scurried past, her gaze fixated on the floor. "Cat got your tongue?" She froze, her shoulders tensing, and for a moment I thought she might flee. But then, slowly, she turned to face him, and the look in her eyes sent a chill down my spine. "Just leave me alone," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Derrick threw back his head and laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that set my teeth on edge. "What's the matter? Daddy's little girl too good to talk to her old man now?" "Derrick, that's enough." I stepped forward, placing a hand on Harper's trembling shoulder. She said, "Leave her alone." His gaze snapped to mine, eyes glittering with malice. "Stay out of this, Raylan. This is between me and my daughter." "Your daughter?" I echoed, my grip tightening on Harper's shoulder. "Since when do you give a damn about being a father? All you care about is yourself and your precious money." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. For a heartbeat, Derrick was speechless, his face contorting with rage. Then, like a coiled serpent, he struck. "How dare you?" he snarled, taking a step forward. "After everything I've done for this family, for your pathetic little hobby, and this is the thanks I get?" Harper flinched, shrinking back against me, but I stood my ground. Reaching into my pocket, I thumbed the record button, capturing every venomous word. "You've done nothing but belittle me, Derrick, lie to me, steal from me. You're a despicable excuse for a husband and a father." His face turned an ugly shade of purple, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then, As quickly as it had come, the storm passed, and he deflated like a punctured balloon. "You'll regret this," he hissed, jabbing a finger in my face. "Mark my words, Raylan, I'll make sure you lose everything." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving Harper and me alone in the oppressive silence. "Mom?" Her voice was small, tremulous. "What's going on?" Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I pulled her close, grateful for the solid weight of her against my side. "It's going to be okay, sweetie," I murmured, more for my own benefit than hers. "Everything's going to be just fine." But as I gazed down the hall where Derrick had disappeared, a tendril of doubt wormed its way into my heart. Had I underestimated his capacity for cruelty? His willingness to drag us all down in his quest for vengeance? Only time would tell. And in the meantime, I would keep fighting. Keep gathering ammunition for the battle to come. Because one thing was certain. I would never let that man break me again. The day had finally come. With Elise's guidance, I'd compiled an ironclad case against Derrick, complete with financial records, audio recordings, and a mountain of damning evidence. There would be no more running, no more hiding. It was time to rip off the mask and expose him for the monster he truly was. "Are you sure about this?" Elise's voice was gentle but laced with steel as we went over the plan one final time. "Once you confront him, there's no going back." I took a deep, steadying breath, my fingers tightening around the thick manila envelope containing the fruits of our labor. "I'm sure. He needs to answer for what he's done." A soft knock at the door shattered the tense silence. "Mom? Elise? It's me, Harper." My heart clenched at the weariness in her voice, a painful reminder of the toll this war had taken on her young spirit. Elise shot me a questioning look, and I nodded, bracing myself for the inevitable explosion. "Come in, sweetie." The door creaked open, and Harper slipped inside, her eyes wide and haunted. "Dad's home," she whispered, wringing her hands. "He's in the living room, waiting for you." My mouth went dry, but I refused to let my nerves show. Squaring my shoulders, I turned to Elise. "It's time." She squeezed my arm, offering a grim smile. "I've got your back, let's do this." With Harper trailing behind, we made our way to the living room, each footstep echoing like a death knell. Derrick looked up as we entered, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Elise. "What's going on here?" he demanded, rising to his feet. "What's she doing in my house?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Elise beat me to it. "Sit down, Derrick," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "We need to have a little chat." He bristled, his jaw clenching. "I don't take orders from—" "Sit down." Elise's tone brooked no argument, and after a tense moment, Derrick lowered himself back onto the couch, his eyes smoldering with barely concealed rage. Sliding the envelope onto the coffee table, I fixed him with an icy glare. "These are detailed financial records, documenting every single penny you've embezzled from my business over the past 5 years. His eyes widened, but he quickly regained his composure, scoffing dismissively. "You're delusional. I've done nothing but support your little hobby. Save it." I jabbed a finger at the envelope. "The evidence is right there, plain as day. Bank statements, wire transfers, everything." Derrick opened his mouth, no doubt to spew forth another round of lies and denials, but I cut him off. "That's not all." Pulling out my phone, I queued up the first in a long line of audio recordings. "I have hours of footage documenting your emotional abuse, your constant belittling and degradation." As his own voice filled the room, hurling insults and venom with chilling casualness, Derrick's face drained of color. Harper gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she listened to her father's hateful words. "No." Derrick's voice was little more than a hoarse croak. "You can't. That's not—" "It's over, Derrick." Elise's voice was cold, utterly devoid of mercy. "We have more than enough evidence to bury you in court. You're going to jail, and Raylan is taking everything, the house, the business, full custody of Harper. You've lost." For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of Derrick's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, he turned to face me, and the look in his eyes sent ice flooding through my veins. "You'll regret this," he hissed, spittle flying from his lips. "I swear to God, Raylan, I'll make you suffer for this. You and that little brat will wish you'd never been born." Before I could respond, Harper was there, stepping between us with her shoulders thrown back and her chin raised in defiant challenge. "That's enough out of you," she spat, her voice trembling but unwavering. You're the one who's going to suffer, you pathetic excuse for a father, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself. Pride swelled in my chest as I watched my daughter stand tall against the man who'd tormented us for so long. In that moment, I knew we would be okay. We would survive this nightmare, and maybe, just maybe, we'd emerge stronger than ever before. Derrick opened his mouth, but whatever vile retort he'd intended died on his lips. With a snarl of impotent rage, he turned and stormed from the room, leaving us standing in silence amidst the wreckage of his shattered lies. It was over. The war had been won. The silence that followed Derrick's departure was deafening. Harper and I stood frozen, still processing the explosive confrontation that had just unfolded. Elise was the first to break the stillness, letting out a long, shuddering breath. "Well, that could have gone better," she muttered, running a hand through her disheveled hair. Harper whirled on her, eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and anger. "You think? That was my dad you just destroyed back there." "Harper," I began, reaching out to her, but she jerked away, hugging herself tightly. "Don't. Just don't." Her voice cracked, and I watched in dismay as tears spilled down her cheeks. "How could you do this, Mom? How could you keep this from me?" The accusation in her tone was like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. "Sweetie, I was just trying to protect you." "Protect me?" She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "From what? The truth? The fact that my own father is a lying, cheating scumbag?" Each word lanced through me, raw and agonizing. Elise stepped forward, her expression softening. "Harper, your mom did what she had to do to keep you both safe. Derrick is a dangerous man, and I don't want to hear it." Harper exploded, whirling on Elise with clenched fists. "You have no idea what you've done, what this is going to do to our family." The anguish in her voice cut me to the core. I wanted nothing more than to take her in my arms, to shield her from the pain and betrayal that had torn our lives asunder. But I knew, deep down, that this was a wound that could not be salved with empty platitudes or motherly affection. This was a hurt that ran bone deep, a festering wound that had been ripped open and left to bleed. "Harper, please." I tried again, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I never wanted to lie to you, but Derrick, he was out of control. He was stealing from me, sabotaging my business, and I was afraid if I told you the truth, he might." "Might what?" she spat, rounding on me with fresh venom. "Hurt us? Abandon us? Well, congratulations, Mom, because now he's going to do both of those things, and so much worse." Her words hit their mark, and I flinched as if struck, because deep down I knew she was right. In my quest for justice, for vengeance against the man who had betrayed and belittled me, I had set in motion a chain of events that would undoubtedly tear our family apart. Derrick's fury knew no bounds, and now that he had been backed into a corner, exposed as the monster he truly was, there was no telling how far he might go to make us pay. A small, traitorous voice whispered that perhaps it would have been better to simply cut my losses, to walk away and start anew. But I knew, in my heart of hearts, that such a path would have led only to more pain, more suffering at his hands. No, I had done the right thing, the only thing I could do to protect Harper and myself from his toxic influence. But that knowledge did little to dull the ache of my daughter's resentment, the guilt that gnawed at my soul for the turmoil I had thrust upon her. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. "I'm so sorry." For a long moment Harper simply stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she turned and fled the room, leaving me standing amidst the wreckage of our fractured family. Elise's hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Give her time, she'll come around." But as I listened to the distant echo of Harper's footsteps, rapidly retreating, I couldn't help but wonder if the damage I had wrought was too deep, too catastrophic to ever be undone. The divorce proceedings were brutal, a no-holds-barred battle fueled by years of pent-up resentment and betrayal. Derrick, his back against the wall, fought like a cornered animal, lashing out with every underhanded tactic in the book. "She's an unfit mother," he snarled during one particularly heated hearing, his eyes boring into me with undisguised hatred. "Manipulative, vindictive. Is that really the kind of influence you want around an impressionable young girl?" I bit back the urge to retaliate, forcing myself to remain composed as Elise rose to my defense. Your Honor, these baseless accusations are nothing more than a desperate attempt to distract from the real issue at hand, Mr. Collins repeated embezzlement and financial malfeasance. Derrick's face purpled, but before he could unleash another volley of vitriol, the judge intervened. That's enough, Mr. Collins. I've seen the evidence, and it paints a very clear picture of your actions. Unless you have something of substance to add, I suggest you remain silent. Seething, Derrick slumped back in his chair, glowering at me from beneath hooded brows. The message in his eyes was clear. This was far from over. With each passing day, the divisions within our shattered family grew deeper and more pronounced. Harper, caught in the crossfire, retreated further into herself, alternating between bouts of stony silence and explosive outbursts directed at both Derrick and me. I hate you both, she raged one night, hurling a glass against the wall with enough force to shatter it into 1,000 pieces. You've ruined everything. I flinched as shards exploded around me, piercing my skin with 1,000 tiny lacerations. But the physical pain paled in comparison to the agony of watching my little girl unravel before my eyes. Derrick, of course, seized the opportunity to drive the wedge deeper, pulling Harper aside and no doubt filling her head with his twisted version of events. Don't listen to a word that lying bitch says, I overheard him hiss, his voice dripping with venom. She's poison, Harper, and she'll only drag you down with her. Part of me wanted to intervene, to shield my daughter from his toxic influence, but a larger, wiser part knew that such actions would only breed more resentment, more ammunition for Derrick's manipulative games. So I kept my distance, focusing my energy on the legal battle that would decide the course of our future. With Elise's guidance, I pored over financial statements and witness testimonies, building an impenetrable case against the man who had once sworn to love and cherish me. The realization that our marriage had devolved into this bitter adversarial farce left a hollow ache in my chest. But I knew there was no going back, no chance of salvaging what had been lost. Derrick had made his choices, and now he would have to face the consequences. As the divorce proceedings ground on, the media caught wind of our sordid drama, unleashing a torrent of salacious headlines and intrusive reporters. Derrick, ever the opportunist, seized his chance to manipulate the narrative, granting exclusive interviews where he painted himself as the long-suffering victim of a deranged, money-hungry shrew. She's out for blood, plain and simple, he lamented to one particularly eager journalist, his eyes glistening with crocodile tears. All I ever wanted was to give my family a good life, but it was never enough for Raylan. She let her greed, her delusions of grandeur consume her. I watched in disgust as his lies played out across newspapers and television screens, each fabrication more outrageous than the last. But I refused to take the bait, to engage in the same mudslinging tactics that Derrick had embraced so wholeheartedly. No, I would let the evidence speak for itself. The truth was on my side, and try as he might, Derrick could never bury that beneath a mountain of deceit and slander. As the media frenzy reached a fever pitch, I found myself longing for the quiet solace of my work, the simple act of creation that had once brought me such joy and fulfillment. But even that refuge had been tainted, the very business I had poured my heart and soul into, now serving as a battleground between Derrick and me. In my darkest moments, I wondered if it had all been worth it, the pain, the betrayal, the shattering of everything I had once held dear. But then I would look at Harper, my beautiful, struggling girl caught in the crossfire of her parents' war, and I would know that I had done the only thing I could. For her sake, and for my own self-respect, I had to keep fighting. No matter how high the cost, I would not let Derrick emerge victorious from the ashes of our family. Not this time. The day of the final court hearing dawned cold and gray, the somber weather mirroring the weight that had settled over my shoulders. As Elise and I made our way through the courthouse doors, a phalanx of reporters descended upon us, cameras flashing and microphones thrust into our faces. Miss Collins, is it true you're seeking full custody of your daughter? How do you respond to the allegations that you've been embezzling funds from your own company? Care to comment on the rumors of your husband's alleged affair? I brushed past them without a word, my jaw clenched in grim determination. Derrick, of course, was reveling in the spectacle, pausing every few steps to preen for the cameras, and offer up sound bites tailored to paint him as the long-suffering victim. "All I've ever wanted is to protect my little girl," he simpered, his expression one of studied anguish. "But Raylan, she's become unhinged, obsessed with money and revenge. It's tragic, really." I felt Elise tense beside me, and I placed a warning hand on her arm. "Don't take the bait," I murmured. "He's not worth it." Her nostrils flared, but she gave a curt nod, and we continued on our way, leaving Derrick to bask in the spotlight he so desperately craved. The courtroom was packed to the rafters, a veritable circus of lawyers, journalists, and gawking spectators. I scanned the crowd, my heart lurching as I spotted Harper sitting towards the back, her shoulders hunched and her gaze determinedly averted from both Derrick and me. As the proceedings got underway, it became immediately apparent that the judge had little patience for Derrick's grandstanding. He cut through the other man's bloated testimony with razor-sharp precision, dismantling his arguments one by one with cold, irrefutable logic. "You claim your wife was obsessed with money and revenge, Mr. Collins," the judge stated, his voice ringing with thinly veiled disdain. "And yet, the financial records clearly show that you embezzled over $500,000 from her company's accounts over the course of 5 years. How do you explain that?" Derrick squirmed in his seat, his bravado faltering under the weight of the damning evidence. "It was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I was simply lying and stealing from your wife, with whom you had entered into a legal contract as a business partner," the judge interrupted, his eyes flashing. "That's what the evidence shows, Mr. Collins. Shall I go on?" As the judge methodically disassembled Derrick's house of lies, I could practically feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. Beside me, Elise radiated quiet triumph, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. When the judge finally rendered his verdict, it felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind from Derrick's sails and leaving him reeling. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I am awarding Miss Collins full ownership of her company, as well as sole custody of her daughter, Harper. Mr. Collins, you are hereby ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $600,000, as well as alimony and child support to be determined at a later date." A stunned silence fell over the courtroom, broken only by the muted sobs of a devastated Derrick. Elise reached over and squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she murmured. "It's over." But as I turned to face my daughter, my heart plummeted. Harper was staring at me, her expression unreadable, a chasm of hurt and betrayal stretching between us. In that moment, I knew that while the legal battle might be won, the war for my daughter's heart and trust was only just beginning. In the days that followed, Derrick's world crumbled around him. His assets were seized, his reputation in tatters. But through it all, he maintained a defiant front, lashing out at anyone and everyone who dared cross his path. It was during one such outburst that Harper, who had been steadfastly avoiding me, finally emerged from the shadows of her self-imposed exile. "You're pathetic," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt as Derrick raged and raved in the aftermath of yet another court ruling. "All this time, I thought Mom was the one destroying this family, but you're the real cancer, aren't you?" Derrick whirled on her, his face contorted in an ugly snarl. "Watch your mouth, you ungrateful little—" "No, you watch yours." Harper stepped forward, her chin raised in defiant challenge. "I'm done listening to your lies, your manipulations. You're a sad, bitter man, and you've got no one to blame but yourself for the mess you've made of your life." As her words washed over him, I saw something shift in Derrick's eyes, a flicker of doubt, of dawning realization that his carefully constructed facade was crumbling. For a heartbeat, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then the moment passed, and the sneer was back, twisted and grotesque. "You'll regret this," he hissed, jabbing a finger in Harper's face. "You and your bitch of a mother will regret the day you ever crossed me." Harper didn't so much as flinch. "Save it for someone who still cares, Dad. You're nothing but a pathetic bully, and I'm done being afraid of you." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Derrick gaping in her wake like a landed fish. Our eyes met for the briefest of moments, and in that fleeting glance I saw a glimmer of the old Harper, strong, defiant, unbroken. In that moment, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together, united, emboldened by the truth that had finally set us free. Derrick might have lost everything, but I had regained something far more precious: my daughter's respect, her trust. And that was a victory worth fighting for. The weeks following the divorce were a whirlwind of activity. With Derrick's vindictive presence finally excised from our lives, Harper and I were free to pick up the pieces and begin rebuilding. Gone were the tense silences, the hostile glares and cutting remarks. In their place was a newfound openness, a willingness to communicate and heal the wounds that had been left to fester for far too long. "I'm sorry, Mom," Harper murmured one night as we sat on the patio, nursing mugs of hot chocolate beneath the star-studded sky, "for the way I acted, for shutting you out when you needed me most." I reached over and squeezed her hand, my heart swelling with a potent mix of love and relief. "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetie. What's important is that we're here now, together. That's all that matters." She offered a tentative smile, and in that moment I saw a glimpse of the carefree girl she had once been, untainted by the bitter rancor of her parents' war. The sight filled me with a renewed sense of determination. I would do whatever it took to shield her from further pain, to ensure that the damage wrought by Derrick's actions did not define the rest of her life. With that goal in mind, I threw myself into resurrecting my fashion line, channeling all the fire and passion that had once fueled my every design. Harper, to my immense pride, joined me wholeheartedly, her artistic flair and keen eye breathing fresh life into my creations. "You know, this whole sustainability thing is actually kind of cool," she remarked one afternoon as we pored over a pile of discarded fabric swatches. "Who knew old rags could look so chic?" I laughed, reveling in the sound of her teasing lilt. "I tried to tell you, didn't I? But you were too busy mocking your poor, delusional mother." She pulled a face, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Yeah, well, I was young and stupid. Not to mention brainwashed by a certain lying snake of a father. The barb stung, but I knew there was no venom behind it, only the stark truth that we were both still coming to terms with." Reaching out, I cupped her cheek, marveling at the way she leaned into my touch rather than recoiling. "The important thing is, we're here now, together, and nothing is ever going to tear us apart again." The words felt like a vow, a solemn promise to the both of us. Harper's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she blinked them away, offering me a watery smile. "You're right. It's you and me against the world, Mom. Always and forever." As our new line began to take shape, the media caught wind of our triumphant reemergence, fueling a flurry of interest and speculation. Interview requests poured in, each more eager than the last to get the inside scoop on our phoenix-like rise from the ashes of scandal and betrayal. I dismissed them all with a polite but firm refusal. This story, our story, was not fodder for the gossip rags or salacious tell-alls. It was ours, a hard-won victory forged in the fires of pain and heartbreak. The only validation I needed was the look of pride in Harper's eyes as we put the finishing touches on our debut collection. Gone were the dark circles and haunted gaze. In their place was a radiant, effervescent joy that warmed me to my very core. "We did it, Mom," she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate stitching of one particularly striking ensemble. "Against all odds, we actually pulled this off." Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I pulled her close, savoring the moment. "Of course we did, baby girl. When have you ever known your mother to back down from a fight?" She laughed, the sound ringing like music through the bustling studio. "Fair point. Though to be honest, I think it was my stubborn determination that really saved the day." "Is that so?" I arched an eyebrow, unable to resist the playful banter. "Well, in that case, maybe I should start calling you Mom instead." Harper made a face, sticking out her tongue. "On second thought, let's not go that far. One diva in the family is more than enough." We dissolved into a fit of giggles, the easy camaraderie a soothing balm on the wounds of the past. In that moment, it was as if the years of turmoil and heartache had never happened. We were just a mother and daughter, united in our love for each other and the craft that had helped heal us both. The night of our launch party, I could scarcely believe how far we'd come. Harper was radiant in one of our signature creations, her megawatt smile lighting up the room as she worked the crowd with effortless poise. Watching her charm and dazzle the assembled fashionistas and industry bigwigs, I felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly stole my breath away. This was her moment, our moment, and no one, not Derrick, Not the naysayers who had doubted us at every turn could ever take that away. As the night drew to a close and the last of the well-wishers trickled out, Harper made her way over to me, her eyes sparkling with unbridled joy. "Well," she murmured, looping her arm through mine, "what did you think? Was it everything you dreamed it would be?" Pulling her close, I pressed a kiss to her temple, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "It was more than I ever could have imagined," I whispered fiercely, "and it's only the beginning, baby girl, for both of us." As we stood there, silhouetted against the twinkling lights of our newfound success, I knew that no matter what challenges the future held, we would face them head-on, side by side, unbroken, unstoppable, invincible. A mother and daughter, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the indomitable strength of our bond. Our story was far from over. It had only just begun.